Good afternoon, and thank you for watching CBS News 24/7. I'm Lindsay Reiser. One person is dead following a clash between federal agents and protesters in Minneapolis. That is according to the Department of Homeland Security. Now, DHS says ICE was conducting targeted operations in the southern part of the city when several people began blocking agents' cars. The department claims the victim, a 37-year-old woman, was one of the violent rioters who weaponized her vehicle and tried to run over agents. According to the Minneapolis police chief, she was in her vehicle, blocking the roadway. Federal law enforcement approached her on foot. She began to drive off. At least 2 shots were fired, and the vehicle then crashed. The mayor of Minneapolis says that she suffered a gunshot wound to her head and was pronounced dead at the hospital. And he disputes that she used her vehicle as a weapon and said, quote, the narrative that this was done in self-defense is a garbage narrative. He also said, ICE, get the bleep out of Minneapolis. DHS Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs says the ICE agent, fearing for his life, shot and killed the alleged perpetrator. Mayor Fry of Minneapolis says he does not have the identity of the agent at this time and says an investigation will need to be done when asked whether the state will be able to file any charges. The death comes amid an influx of 2,000 law enforcement members into the Twin Cities metro area. The city's mayor is calling, as I mentioned, for those agents to leave and saying that they are trying to solve a problem they created themselves and causing chaos and distrust. CBS News correspondent Shanelle Kaul is following this for us. Shanelle, there is a plethora of video on social media, of course. We as a news organization are going through that and seeing what we can verify. We don't know exactly which videos Mayor Fry saw, which leads him to say that this was not self-defense. But what can you tell us about the videos you're seeing?
Yeah, there is a lot of video showing up on social media, Lindsay, and some of it is purporting to show the moment that those shots rang out in that South Minneapolis neighborhood. Again, we are working to confirm and to verify that video before we can share it with you. But I do have 2 new videos that have been verified from our CBS News teams that I can show with you right now that show the aftermath of that shooting. So take a look at this. You can see that there were ICE agents sort of lining the snowy street, and then you see them kind of pulling out this person from the car. They seem to be then performing CPR on this person. Of course, you know, the camera is going back and forth. You can imagine this was quite a chaotic scene. But at the end of these videos, 2 things are true. You see them carrying this person away on their hands and feet. We also heard from a witness on the scene, Lindsay. I want to play for you part of that interview. Take a listen.
They were not allowing EMS to come with in timely manner. They were DHS and them. They were blocking the roads and not letting EMS come with like time and like the ambulance. They just kept the roads blocked for a very long time to the point the body had to like literally get carried out the way it did.
Now, as for what happened in the moments that led up to this shooting, that's still what we're working to determine and to verify right now. But we did get a couple of different accounts of what happened. So let's start with what DHS is saying unfolded here in Minneapolis today. I'll share my screen with you so you can see this, and I'll read you part of this social media post, Lindsay. It says, ICE officers in Minneapolis were conducting targeted operations when riders began blocking ICE officers, and one of these violent riders weaponized her vehicle, they say, attempting to run over our law enforcement officers in an attempt to kill them. It goes on to say that this is characterized by DHS as an act of domestic terrorism. An ICE officer, fearing for his life, the lives of his fellow law enforcement and safety of the public, fired defensive shots. So a couple of key things coming out of here. We know there were multiple shots. That is what DHS is confirming. And then later on in this statement, they also say the alleged perpetrator was hit and is deceased, also adding that the ICE officers who were hurt, they say, are expected to make full recoveries. Now, I was talking to you about how we're getting varied accounts of exactly what happened because we also, just moments ago, Lindsay, heard from the city's mayor, we heard from local law enforcement, and they have a very different account of what happened. In fact, local law enforcement just moments ago said it doesn't appear that the person, quote, rammed anyone. The mayor, Lindsay, even calling the narrative that this was done in self-defense, quote, a garbage narrative.
And also, we're learning a little bit more about the woman. As I mentioned, she's 37. Senator Smith says that she's an American citizen. And we also did learn in that press conference that they say that she was not a target of one of those ICE raids. I'm trying to find the exact quote that they used here.
Yeah, I think we're still trying to determine exactly what she was doing in the country and her nationality, all of that. But I can tell you that her neighbors did come out in the moments following that shooting. Obviously, they were there. They heard those loud bangs, and that is what created those clashes between police and protesters. There was a large group that gathered on this very residential and snowy street. And Lindsay, that's really when the chaos began. And then eventually that is what led to tear gas or those chemical irritants being used by police and law enforcement there to try to disperse people who'd gathered in reaction to that shooting.
All right, Shanelle, stay with us in case we need to go back to you. Thank you so much. Homeland Security correspondent Nicole Sganga joins us now from Minneapolis. And Nicole, you are in the region. You're based in Washington, D.C., but you're there because you went on a ride along with DHS. You had an exclusive interview with DHS Secretary Noem. What can you tell us from what you've been hearing from witnesses?
Well, we just spoke to a witness who was literally on the street, catty corner to where this all played out. She had been filming, and she told us that she saw an enormous presence of ICE vehicles. They were unmarked cars. She described what you can see in the video that is circulated of the incident, that red SUV sort of backing up, looking like it might have been parking, agents approaching. And then as she was passing the vehicle, she heard pop, 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 3 distinct pops, and she knew right away that it was gunfire, immediately turned around and saw a crash. And then in the ensuing moments, there were ICE officers who responded and deployed tear gas, is what one eyewitness told us. Another eyewitness told us that they ran out afterwards. They saw law enforcement surrounding the individual in the car, begin to perform CPR, and eventually an ambulance came. At that point, that eyewitness told us it was clear that the individual had died because law enforcement was not rushing around her, so likely pronounced dead at the scene. I will tell you, having embedded with ICE law enforcement yesterday, having covered Homeland Security for a while now, this is an enormous law enforcement deployment that we have seen in the Minneapolis area. More than 2,100 federal agents from ICE and Homeland Security investigations. It's more than New York City. It's more than Los Angeles. That's more than Chicago. And we've also been talking not only with law enforcement, but with residents here in Minneapolis in the area, members of the Somali American community who are disturbed, who are scared, neighbors here on the street telling us they knew this was not an if, but when, that this is their worst nightmare, and that if the Trump administration's intent is to promote public safety, this is doing the exact opposite. Now, we saw DHS put out a statement claiming that ICE officers fired because, in particular, one ICE agent fired because they believed their life was at risk and that they were defending both their own personal safety and the safety of other officers. That statement goes on to include some statistics, an 8,000% increase in threats to ICE personnel under the Trump administration compared to the Biden administration. And it speaks to that ongoing tension. But if you look at the video, and we're still learning new details, a much different scene played out. And we have seen FBI personnel on the scene. They will be taking the lead looking into this officer-involved shooting, as is customary. Behind me, there is protests that are happening. You can see hundreds of people. Earlier, we witnessed and were experiencing tear gas as canisters were deployed by ICE officers. We saw people choking, vomiting on the streets. This neighborhood is described to us by folks who live here as being very calm, very friendly. There's a school nearby. Everyone we've spoken to is just devastated that this is happening in their community.
All right, Nicole, thank you very much.